is the fairest of them all? It isn't who you think. Join us for a magical journey to the Seven Dwarfs' cottage, where we learn that true beauty comes from the heart. Snuggle in and close your eyes. Tonight, we are traveling through the snowy woods to a tiny cottage with 7 little beds to meet a princess whose heart is as pure as gold. Snow White, Heart of Gold.
Once upon a time, in the very middle of winter, when the snowflakes were falling like soft, white feathers from the sky, a queen sat sewing at her window. The frame of the window was made of fine black ebony wood, dark and strong. As she sewed and looked out at the silent, snowy world, she pricked her finger with her needle. 3 little drops of red fell onto the white snow on the windowsill. The queen thought to herself, "Oh, how I wish I had a child as white as snow, as red as roses, and as black as this ebony wood." Not long after, a little daughter was born to her. Her skin was indeed as white as snow, her lips as red as roses, and her hair as black as ebony wood. They called her Snow White. But sadly, the gentle queen passed away, leaving the king and the little girl behind.
Time passed, and the king married a new queen. She was a beautiful woman, but she was very proud and could not bear to think that anyone in the world was more beautiful than she was. She had a magical mirror on her wall. Every morning, she would stand before it, gaze at her reflection, and say, "Mirror, mirror, on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror, which always spoke the truth, would answer, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." Then the queen would smile, for she knew the mirror could not lie. But Snow White was growing up. She was not just beautiful on the outside, she was beautiful on the inside too. She was kind to everyone she met, from the castle servants to the smallest birds in the garden. By the time she was 7 years old, she was as bright as the day.
One morning, the queen went to her mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror, on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror paused, shimmering with light, and replied, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen turned green with jealousy. She called for a huntsman and gave him a terrible order. "Take the child away into the deep forest," she said. "I never want to see her again." The huntsman took Snow White into the woods. But when he looked at her, he saw how innocent and kind she was. She was picking wildflowers and humming a gentle tune. The huntsman's heart softened. He could not hurt her. "Run away, poor child," the huntsman whispered. "Run into the woods and find a safe place. Do not return to the castle." Snow White was all alone in the great forest. The trees seemed very tall, and the shadows seemed very long. She began to run over sharp stones and through thorns, but the wild animals did not hurt her. Instead, a little deer showed her a path, and bluebirds flew ahead of her to guide the way. She ran until evening came, and then she saw a little house tucked between two ancient oak trees. It was a tiny, cozy cottage with a thatched roof. Snow White knocked on the door, but no one answered. She pushed the door open and went inside to rest. Everything inside was small, but perfectly clean and tidy. There was a little table with a white cloth, and on it were set 7 little plates, 7 little spoons, 7 little knives and forks, and 7 little mugs. Against the wall stood 7 little beds, all covered with snow-white sheets. Snow White was very hungry and thirsty. She ate a tiny bit of vegetables and bread from each plate, and drank a drop of juice from each mug, for she did not want to take everything from just one person. Then, because she was so tired, she lay down on one of the little beds. But one was too long, another too short, until finally the 7th bed was just right. She curled up, said her prayers, and fell fast asleep. When it was quite dark, the masters of the cottage came home. They were 7 kind dwarfs who dug for gold and copper in the mountains. They lit their 7 candles and saw that someone had been there. "Who has been sitting on my chair?" asked the first dwarf. "Who has been eating from my plate?" asked the second. "Who has been using my fork?" asked the third. "Who has been cutting with my knife?" asked the fourth. "Who has been drinking from my mug?" asked the fifth. Then the 6th dwarf looked around and saw a dent in his bed. "Who has been stepping on my bed?" The 7th dwarf ran to his bed and saw Snow White sleeping there. He called the others, who came running with their candles. The light fell upon her face. "Oh, heavens," they whispered, "what a lovely child." They were so happy to see her that they did not wake her up. The 7th dwarf slept with his companions, 1 hour with each, until the night had passed. When morning came, Snow White woke up and was frightened when she saw the 7 dwarfs. But they smiled kindly at her. "What is your name?" asked the eldest dwarf. "My name is Snow White," she answered politely. "How did you find your way to our house?" they asked. She told them her story, how her stepmother had sent her away, and how the animals had guided her here. The dwarfs spoke among themselves. "If you will help us look after our house, cook, make the beds, wash, sew and knit, and keep everything clean and orderly, you can stay with us, and you shall want for nothing. We will keep you safe." "Yes," said Snow White, "with all my heart." And so she stayed. She kept the house in order while the dwarfs went to the mountains every morning. In the evenings, they came back, and dinner was always ready. They became the best of friends. But every morning, before they left, the dwarfs warned her. "Beware of your stepmother. She will soon know you are here. Don't let anyone into the house while we are gone." Back at the castle, the queen stood before her mirror, thinking she was again the most beautiful woman in the land. She asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?"
The mirror answered, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true. But over the hills where the 7 dwarfs dwell, Snow White is still alive and well, and she is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen trembled with rage. She knew she had to go herself. She painted her face and dressed up like an old peddler woman so no one would recognize her. She traveled over the 7 mountains to the 7 dwarfs' house and knocked on the door. "Good things to sell! Good wares to sell!" she cried. Snow White peeked out the window. "What do you have?" "Bodice laces of all colors," the old woman said, holding up one woven of blue and yellow silk. "It seems like a kind woman," Snow White thought. "I can let her in." She unbolted the door. "Oh, child," the old woman said, "let me lace your dress properly for you." Snow White stood still, but the old woman laced the ribbon so tight that Snow White lost her breath and fell down as if she were asleep. "Now I am the fairest," the queen whispered, and ran away. Not long after, the 7 dwarfs came home. How frightened they were to see their dear Snow White lying on the floor. They quickly cut the tight lace, and slowly she began to breathe again. When the dwarfs heard what happened, they said, "That old woman was the queen. You must promise never to open the door again." At the castle, the queen asked her mirror again, and again it told her that Snow White was still the fairest. The queen was furious. She used her dark magic to make a poisoned comb. She disguised herself as a different old woman and went back to the cottage. "Good wares to sell," she called out. "I cannot let anyone in," Snow White cried from the window. "Just look at this lovely comb," the woman said, holding up the shiny golden object. It was so beautiful that Snow White forgot her promise and opened the door. The woman put the comb in Snow White's hair, and the magic took over immediately. Snow White fell to the floor in a deep sleep. Luckily, the dwarfs came home early that day. They found the comb, pulled it out, and Snow White woke up. She promised them, crossing her heart, that she would never, ever open the door again. When the queen heard from the mirror that Snow White was still alive, she shook with anger. She went into a secret room and made a poisoned apple. It looked beautiful, white with a red cheek, so tempting that everyone who saw it wanted to eat it. She dressed herself as a farmer's wife and went to the dwarf's house. She knocked. "I cannot let anyone in," Snow White said. "The 7 dwarfs have forbidden me." "That is fine," said the woman. "I just want to get rid of my apples. Here, I will give you one as a gift." "No, I cannot take it," said Snow White. "Are you afraid of poison?" asked the woman. "Look, I will cut the apple in 2. I will eat the white side, and you eat the red side." The queen had made the apple so that only the red side was poisoned. Snow White looked at the beautiful apple, and when she saw the woman eating her half, she could not resist. She reached out her hand and took the red half. But barely had she taken a bite when she fell to the floor, still and silent. The queen laughed a cruel laugh, white as snow, red as blood,
black as ebony. This time the dwarfs cannot wake you." When the dwarfs came home, they found Snow White lying on the floor. They loosened her lace, they looked for a comb, they washed her face with water and wine, but nothing helped. Their dear friend was gone. They wept for 3 long days. They wanted to bury her, but she still looked as fresh and healthy as if she were only sleeping. Her cheeks were still red. "We cannot bury her in the dark earth," they said. They had a clear glass coffin made so she could be seen from all sides. They laid her inside and wrote her name on it in golden letters. They carried the coffin to a sunny clearing on the mountain. One of them always stayed by it to watch over her. And the animals came too, the owl, the raven, and the dove, to mourn for her. Snow White lay in the coffin for a long, long time, and she did not change. She looked as if she were sleeping. It happened that a prince was riding through the forest. He arrived at the dwarf's house seeking shelter. He saw the coffin on the mountain and the beautiful girl inside. He read the golden letters. He said to the dwarfs, "Let me have the coffin. I will give you whatever you ask for it." But the dwarfs said, "We would not give her up for all the gold in the world." Then the prince said, "Please, give her to me, for I cannot live without seeing Snow White. I will honor and prize her as my dearest friend." The good dwarfs felt pity for him and gave him the coffin. The prince had his servants carry the coffin away on their shoulders. But as they walked through the woods, one of them stumbled over a tree root. The coffin jolted heavily. The piece of poisoned apple, which was still stuck in Snow White's throat, was shaken loose by the jolt. A moment later, she opened her eyes, lifted the lid of the coffin, and sat up. She was alive again. "Oh, where am I?" she cried. The prince was full of joy. "You are safe with me," he said. He told her what had happened and said, "I love you more than anything in the world. Come with me to my father's castle and be my wife." Snow White, seeing how kind and gentle the prince was, agreed. She said goodbye to the dwarfs, promising to visit them often, and went with the prince. Their wedding was planned with great splendor and majesty. But what of the wicked queen? She had been invited to the wedding feast. Before she left, she asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror answered, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true, but the young queen is 1,000 times fairer than you." The wicked queen was terrified. She did not want to go to the wedding, but her jealousy forced her to go and see this young queen. When she entered the hall and saw Snow White, she was so overcome with anger and fear that she could not move. She realized that kindness had won, and that her jealousy had only brought her misery. She turned and ran out of the castle into the dark night and was never seen again. Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after, and the 7 dwarfs were always welcome guests at their table. And that, my little friend, was the story of Snow White.
A tale of apples, mirrors, and a very happy ending. Now, while you snuggle down deep under your covers, let's think for a moment about the secrets hidden inside this story. Did you notice something about the wicked queen? She was very beautiful on the outside, wasn't she? She had fine clothes and a shining crown, but she wasn't very happy. That's because her heart was full of jealousy. She wanted to be the only pretty person in the world. But Snow White was different. She was beautiful, yes, but the reason the animals, the birds, and the 7 dwarfs loved her wasn't because of her hair or her skin. It was because she was kind. That is the first secret. True beauty isn't about what you see in a mirror. True beauty is about having a heart that cares for others. When you are kind, you shine from the inside out, brighter than any diamond. And because she was so kind, she found wonderful friends. Think about the 7 dwarfs. They worked hard in the mountains all day, but they were happy to come home to Snow White. They protected her, and she took care of them. It reminds us that when we share our toys, say nice words, and help people, we are building strong friendships. Just like the dwarves saved Snow White, good friends look out for each other. Now, Snow White did make a little mistake, didn't she? Do you remember? The dwarves told her, "Don't open the door." But she forgot. She let the old woman in because the comb and the apple looked so shiny. It's a gentle reminder for us too. When your mom, dad, or the grown-ups who love you give you rules like hold my hand or don't talk to strangers, they are doing it to keep you safe, just like the dwarves tried to keep Snow White safe. Listening to them is a very smart thing to do. But the best part of the story is the end. Even when Snow White was asleep for a long, long time and things seemed sad, hope was not lost. Goodness is stronger than wickedness. In the end, kindness won. So, as you close your eyes tonight, I want you to imagine you are in that cozy little cottage in the woods. It is warm and safe. Think about how happy the dwarves were to help their friend. Remember that you have a heart of gold, just like Snow White. You are kind, you are loved, and you are safe.
The video ends here. Please subscribe, like, and share for more inspiring stories. See you in the next video.